I'm here with Cushla Tangaere Manuel, who is the Labour Party candidate for Ikaroa-Rāwhiti. Kia ora, Cushla, and welcome.
Kia ora, Andrew. Good to be here.
Yeah, good to finally meet you as well. Cushla, you were a fairly late replacement as Labour candidate for the person who's your opponent now, Meka Whātere, who moved over to Te Pāti Māori. Have you always wanted to be a politician, or is this just an opportunity that arose?
It's funny, yesterday someone said to me, man, I wish I knew you had political ambitions, I would have shoulder tapped you. And I said I didn't.
Yeah.
You know, when Labour found themselves needing a candidate at very short notice, it's a privilege to have been trusted with the candidacy. And I mean, I think the people trust me. Number one, you know, our family's got a long history with Labour, particularly with Parikura Horomia.
Yeah.
But two, they've seen that I've been born into a life of service. They trust me. They know we've got a lot to go through, and they know that I'll go through it with them.
Yeah. Why did you decide to stand? What was it that actually sort of tipped it over for you?
Well, a couple of things. One, I was asked, you know, as you know, they needed a candidate at quite short notice. And on the phone call, I thought, this can't be coincidence. Sometimes things happen the long way around. And about 20 or so years ago, Parikura had asked both my brother and I to get into the life of politics and, you know, eventually succeed him. It didn't happen, but woe betide, here we are now. But like I said, really how it's come about is probably my parents, more so my mother, who would just do whatever needed to be done to help people. And I was taught by my parents, if you have the skills to help, you should use them.
Now you talk about that life of service, because you have actually got quite a good sort of track record in that. You obviously heavily involved in Ngāti Porou Rugby and also the New Zealand Rugby as well. Tell us a bit about your background.
So my first ever paid job, so to speak, was as a kohanga reo kaiako back in Rangituki, and that was a really good insight into whānau and what's required just to get a child through the door at an educational institution. Probably the best career I could have asked for in terms of resourcefulness as well. You know, so I had to translate and create a lot of my own resources. While I was still living at home, naturally got involved in youth work, because that's what you do when you live in a small community. You do what you can to help. And through that, I met a man from Kahungunu here called Paraire Huata, who had a private training enterprise called Te Ngaru Learning Systems. Yeah. And I ended up working for him, and we taught Māori models of practice in health. So we did a lot of work with organisations who work with addiction and mental health. And I did that for a while, actually. Had my own company delivering that around the country. Beautiful way to see our country. Then my mother died. And I thought, gee, this mahi seems very grown up. I think I want to do what I wanted to do when I was younger. Well, one of the things I wanted to do, which was journalism. Yeah. And so then I went to work for Marae at TVNZ, and I spent about 10 years working in media, both TV and iwi radio, which once again afforded me the opportunity to move home. When I was back home, my father-in-law actually was the first one who said to me, hey, East Coast are looking for a CEO. And I thought, well, that's not really a story. I thought he wanted me to cover it. So about three people I trusted, once again, and who trusted me, asked me to apply for that job. So I did, so that I could tell them I'd applied for it and then move on with my life. And then I got it. And, you know, it's been a very impactful job for me. I've learnt something about a whole new industry, but it's also taught me that as far a leap as that might have seemed, a lot of the skills I have are transferable no matter what. So I feel like all those careers have now come together to prepare me for this next step.
Well, they say that rugby politics is almost as bad as real politics.
I tell you.
Do you think that has prepared you for Parliament?
Someone said to me, what a leap from rugby to politics. I said, not at all. Even in Ngāti Porou, you know, that's like a mini beehive. I've got to respect the mana motuhake of every club and every ground, and a New Zealand rugby exactly the same, you know, with all the provincial unions. You have to balance the individual rights with the greater good.
Yeah. Now, as we were talking, you were a late starter in this campaign. Has that been a disadvantage for you, or has it sort of given you extra motivation?
I think, yeah, it depends how you look at it. If any disadvantage, probably less time to get name recognition further around the rohe. But the beauty of it is no time to muck around, no time for doubts, just having to get out there. That said, you know, we did sit down and strategise how best to do this.
Yeah.
So the strategy was sort out my own backyard first.
Yeah.
So we went around the East Coast because even though I'm a Ngāti girl through and through, you can't take anything for granted. Nobody likes being taken for granted.
Yeah.
And I didn't want our people to feel that way.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know that when I was out in the wider district, I did indeed have the support of home.
Yeah.
And from there, I've pretty much been on the road ever since.
Yeah, because while she has lived up in Gisborne, Mecca is largely from here, from Whakatu and that. So it is sort of a East Coast versus Hawke's Bay kind of thing. So are you finding it easy to get around Hawke's Bay and get that name recognition?
Well, first of all, before I moved the campaign further south, and particularly into Ngāti Kahungunu, I did reach out to Mecca out of respect, knowing that her whakapapa here is strong.
Yes.
And just letting her know, soon I'll be coming into her whenua, onto her whenua, so to speak. And wherever I've been, it's been important for me to start with like a whakatau at a marae to arrive properly before I go takataka here around on their whenua. Once I get indoors, I've been really pleased with the reception. I mean, we're all respectful to each other. And it's really about giving people the opportunity to sort of suss me out, have a look, ask questions. Because really that's my job, is to listen to the people.
Yeah.
And to earn their trust and to earn their respect as their MP. So I'm really heartened by the responses I've had everywhere I've been. There might have been a couple of hesitancies because when you've been with someone for 10 years, sometimes you have that sense of loyalty.
Yeah.
But ultimately, people have given me the opportunity to enter their spaces, and we've had good kōrero. Yeah.
Because it's interesting, I've covered these electorates for quite a while now, and I've always been struck by the level of respect in Ikaroa-Rāwhiti, and when I interviewed Mecca, she had really positive, good things to say about you. It was almost like you weren't an opponent, but a friend, and you saying the same. Is that sort of, it takes it to a level of debating the issues rather than the person, I suppose? Yeah,
I'm really pleased with the comments that we've received. People going, my goodness, there's such a level of respect.
Yeah.
And I think the highest compliment I've received in that regard is you're giving people a look at what it could be like.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel like there's so much focus on negating another party instead of promoting yours and yourself and what you can offer. So I'm really pleased. The last thing our people need is to see us fighting each other. We're not the opponent. And in terms of me being a Labour candidate, I'm quite clear that Te Pāti Māori are not the opponent.
Yeah.
We need a Labour government to keep building on the many benefits we've seen for Māori.
Yeah. Now, polls are indicating that for Labour's got quite a tough task to become government again, and they're indicating that it could be a reduced caucus if they do become opposition and that. Are you prepared for that? Because if you win, obviously you'll be in that caucus and that. Are you prepared to go into sort of a smaller team and that?
Yeah, I mean, the main thing, and this is something that Parekura used to always say, and actually it's something Mika said in the last election as well, you have to be sitting at that decision-making table. So really, to me, that's part of my responsibility on behalf of the constituents of Ikaroa-Rāwhiti, is to take that voice to that decision-making table.
Now, there was a poll last week which had you ahead of Mecca. The key there was a very large undecided. What do you say to that poll? Does that give you hope and that, or is it just, well, the only poll that counts is on the day kind of thing?
Well, a bit of both. I mean, at the end of the day, that is what matters. I've been saying to a lot of people, giving me a hug and patting me on the back is lovely, but I need you to turn up and vote. And, you know, so we did a bit of a promotion to our whānau living overseas as well.
Okay.
So it was very humbling, but pleasing, you know, because when I committed to this, I also committed to getting around and meeting the people. And I think that's a reflection that they appreciate that. And I'll continue to work. I'll stay on the road and, you know, just keep giving people the opportunity to ask questions until they're sure. And then we change that 29%'s mind. Yeah.
Now, what are your main issues that you're standing on?
So, obviously, the people bring me the issues. Yeah. And I mean, there'll be no secret to you, Andrew. They're no secret to anyone, you know, the cost of living, housing, health. The big thing in terms of Ikaroa-Rāwhiti that's really important is no matter what we're talking about, whānau hapu iwi want to be heard. They want to be involved, not just in delivery, because we saw during COVID, we saw during the cyclone, iwi stood up quickly and iwi stood up effectively, but those were responses. We want to have a voice from design to delivery.
Okay, and just in terms of the cost of living, just going around, you would have seen and heard stories. How tough is it out there for people?
Yeah, it's interesting, and you know, it's tough. It is tough, and I acknowledge that. And you know, tēnei mihi nui ki ngā whānau e noho ana I raro i aua āhuatanga. And so that's why I like the Labour approach of not just one chunk here for one lot of people, you know. So it is the things like the $5 prescriptions and the energy payment, which in particular, and I must acknowledge our elderly who hardly ever get spoken about when it comes to elections. It's like they're not the sexy lot or the ones we have to chase. So I think I just want to acknowledge that they're front of mind for me, our elderly as well.
How will you help them?
By showing up and listening to them and advocating for them. And you know, I had a really interesting conversation with a group. Common sense things, Andrew. And you know, sometimes we forget common sense is not so common. But one of the things that a particular elderly group asked was, can we get paid weekly instead of fortnightly? You know, and for them that's going to help with budgeting. And sadly, address the issue of, some of my grandchildren know that I'm rich this fortnight and then sometimes got to struggle. I mean, that's a whole other issue as well, right? But it's you know, things don't have to be major changes to have a profound impact on people's lives. And that's the value of just listening to what they want. So they love the free prescriptions and the energy payments. You know, GST or fruit and veggies. Some people have quaffed at that, but when you're talking to people in Wainui-o-Mata at the food bank who are telling me $5 means parents can get the nappies and the tea bags. You know, if you haven't been in that position, you don't know how impactful $4.90 might be to you. It's assisting with retrofitting houses. You know, Labour has put a major, like 730 million just in Māori housing last year, targeted, but it's also the retrofitting, assisting with solar power. So it's all these things that add up to help make lives better. My favourite aspect, Andrew, is incentivising work. You know, because, you know, in the past, you'd be, if you earn so much, but helping people, increasing the working for families payments, I really like that. We want to lift people, and there is mana in working.
Now, obviously, Tairāwhiti and Hawke's Bay was badly hit by Cyclone Gabriel. Were you personally affected by it at all?
Other than being cut off, you know, honestly, I feel truly blessed that we still had our home. And so while I was part of the outreach for the whānau, immediately in our whānau, our community, I feel, are very fortunate because we were highly inconvenienced with having no power and no access by road, but we all still had our lives and we all still had our homes. So to visit Omahu and just see the amazing work they've done and work still to be done, to go and see them and just assure them, you know, because I said to them, what do you need from me if I'm your MP? And they said, just stay with us. Don't leave us. And for some people, just saying that has been enough to sway them and think, yeah, we'll give you our support. And I realise, Andrew, that at this point, I am a great unknown to some people, so they just have to take me at my word.
Yeah. Now, obviously you've seen the devastation and that, and do you think, because there has been some criticism of Labour's response and that, do you think the government is doing enough?
The thing, it's never fast enough, right?
Yeah.
When you're in crisis, it's not fast enough. But what I'm pleased about is that and this is where I know, because part of the response on the ground, they responded directly through iwi. So the terrible thing was we had a cyclone. The positive is that it was a fantastic affirmation of the ability of people on the ground to deliver for their own. And so now the government is getting more and more comfortable with dealing directly with iwi, which I think is the way to go. We could cut a few layers out.
Yeah.
So I do think we've done enough, and because, when we were in Te Karaka the other day, privileged to be with Minister to go and announce to the families there another 10 or 15 million to raise their houses. Now, that might not sound like much, but that actually means people can stay on the land where they're from.
Yeah.
Assisted relocation's not always relevant to us. We belong to our land.
Yeah.
And while to have a government that supports and understands that is fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, we've invested in debris removal. I think the main thing for me to get across is that we're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
We're not just, it's not a full stop, that's the end. And I think the government have demonstrated that. There's been a fund, a review, another fund, a review. I mean, it's just like a wife that wants to go shopping. It's never going to be enough, Andrew, but the reassurance is that we're not going to just abandon people.
Now, interesting you mentioned the connection of Māori to the land, because obviously there's been much said about the different categories, and category 3 means people have to move their houses, and obviously some marae are in that category, and Meka Whātiri was actually saying that it's terrible to have to ask these hapu and that to leave their marae, and she thinks there might be better if there was a system where they could keep their land but move their marae somewhere else but still be in touch with that land. What do you say to that?
I don't think anyone has the right to ask anyone to leave their marae. But what I have come across is marae independently of their own volition making those considerations. No one wants a government to come and tell you where you can be and where you cannot.
But what if it's not safe?
Well, if it's not safe, the whānau have to take the responsibility to make that decision as well. So we were at Rangatira Marae in Te Karaka the other day, and that's exactly what they're opting to do now. And also there's the FOSL, and it's for the consideration of seriously affected land. We also have the protection of the ture whenua Māori as well. So, whānau, I'm talking about mana motuhake, as I said earlier, the job is to listen. Whānau sometimes will have to make those decisions themselves, and we actually saw some whānau making the devastating decisions to take down their whare tipuna for the safety. So I don't think we can give a blanket answer other than to commit to work through each case with the affected whānau.
Yeah. Now, another big issue, especially up in Tairawhiti, has been slash and the woody waste that's come down and that can cause some major damage and problems. Do you think that the forestry companies should be held accountable for and should have to remove the waste that they leave?
Yeah, so you would have seen in Hawke's report, all the things that need to happen. And I think moving forward, we're definitely going to have to look at the operational practices in the industry. I'm not sure if you would have heard Pēni Henare when he launched the report, talking about a transitional impact. Moving forward, definitely we're going to have to think better about how we, number one, contract people and what their requirements are. At the moment, again in Te Karaka, sad to keep using them, but they were such a devastated community.
Yeah.
Looking at the local knowledge who are removing the slash there now, and already screaming out after the $2 million investment and the smart way they've used it actually, in terms of chipping it so that they don't have to have the expense of carting it out. Well, and they can't cart it out because the land is so sodden, and turning it into firewood, but already pointing out to Minister Jackson, beyond that ridge there's more slash about to come down.
Yeah.
So already we know there's going to have to be another investment, and we know that forestry practices have to change.
Yeah. Now, moving on to other issues, what's your view on co-governance?
Well, you know, really, so this morning we were at a Waingako, beautiful development in Flaxmere. Great example of co-governance, you know. It was a relationship between government, iwi, councils, whānau, hapu. So I support all co-governance agreements staying in place. I think the main thing around co-governance is that whoever the co are genuinely equal partners.
Yeah. And who owns the water in the country?
Well, Māori have customary rights, and you know we are kaitiaki.
Yeah.
So once again, that's going to go case by case. You've got examples where councils and iwi are working really well together. Actually, where I'm from, I had to come off a project between our local hapu and council. So, you know, that's quite a complex issue. But what we were working through in our hapu at home in Rangitukia was where, you know, the ngutuawa of the Waipu River is about hapu even wanting to go bypass, not just go through Runanga, but have their own, because we've all got our own waterways in our various small communities, own relationships with Runanga and council.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's convenient, right, when you've got one organisation to deal with. So it is going to be like opening a can of worms, but if we're truly talking mana motuhake and kaitiakitanga, sometimes you've got to go to those deeper roots.
Do you think, because there's been a lot of controversy over the three waters and then they've changed it, do you think that is the right model to go, taking it sort of away from the councils and that?
I don't have a personal stance on it, but I support Nanaia and I trust Nanaia Mahuta. And I mean, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but it was really sad, you know, what she went through personally and politically through that. I think it's all about relationships and individual relationships in each, as it relates to each body of water that we're talking about.
Now, the country seems to be quite divided at the moment. You've got ACT on the one hand, and then you've also got conspiracy theorists and that, and then you've got sort of the far left as well. Do you think New Zealand is a racist country?
I think some of the comments are skewed that way. You know, some of the campaign tactics. Someone asked me about that actually. The question was actually, how do you feel about the fact that race is being used, you know, as fear-mongering in this campaign? And my answer was that I'm happy because at least now our people know where certain parties sit. You know, in the past it might have been easy to lull us into a false sense of security by saying, you know, we'll still work with Māori, we work in the best interests of Māori, so their stance is actually beneficial. I think that view is a dying view. I've got a lot of confidence in the generations, actually the next generation. The reo is spoken freely and beautifully across all cultures. At the moment it's accessible. Partnership is not something that scares rangatahi. So I've got hope for our Aotearoa.
Now, another issue, you mentioned you were a youth worker and that Rangatamariki, just the name brings about quite a few emotions in people. Do you think it's getting it right, or do you think there's still work to do in that regard?
I think it's positive that the review has been done. And, you know, looking at actioning the recommendations. The big thing there, from a Te Ao Māori view, is, you know, we have to look at whānau-centred models of practice, and I'm confident that a Labour government will support us moving that way. That's certainly something I'd advocate.
And children being taken away from whānau, what's your view on that?
Never ideal. Obviously, first of all, the child safety is the most important thing. But that's why a whānau-centric model is essential. Because you've got to heal the whole family. You know, it's sometimes if you just isolate someone, take the child out, the whole whānau's got to go with it, got to go with you. And an example of what that might look like, for people who are wondering, my sister just started, well, it's not just started, she started the only marae-based live-in rehab. Initially targeted at methamphetamine, so it's an 8-week marae-based rehab, open to the whole family.
Wow.
So your wife can come, your children can come, your whole whānau, so that you go through the healing together. So that's what I mean when I mean a whānau-centric model. And this is very sensitive, right, when we're talking about tamariki and oranga tamariki, because the mokopuna is the most important thing. So there's not one answer, but if we're talking whakaaro Māori, we've got to consider the whole whānau.
Yeah. Now, you're not on the Labour Party list, so if you don't win this, you're not in. What will you do if you don't win?
Well, I was contracting, I've been remained a consultant for the last few years. To be fair, I was quite happily working at New Zealand Rugby and still felt like I had a bit of work to do there, but this was a greater calling. So that is an important message that I sometimes forget to share with whānau, is that I did this because I was asked to, and it feels like a responsibility to take, and something I know I can do.
Yeah.
But I didn't do it because I wanted a job in the beehive.
Yeah.
I did it because it's an opportunity to serve my people in an even greater way, and to move and to... I've seen so many amazing people and amazing initiatives throughout Ikaroa-Rāwhiti, on my journey. And just to make sure that not only do we maintain those, but grow them. And allow people to grow their own communities. We don't need to get in the way, people know what they're doing. And one of the simplest, but probably most profound tono or request that I've had from someone is, we just want to grow our people and our culture. Once we do that, we'll find jobs, we'll get housing. Let us just fund us to learn and entrench our culture.
Now, what is one thing that you can promise the voters of Ikaroa-Rāwhiti that you will do for them when you are elected, if you are elected?
I will show up, I will listen, and I will follow through. And, that was one of the earliest questions. How can you serve us when you live up there?
Yeah.
And that's it. I've showed up, I've listened, I will follow through, because if I let anyone in the rohe down, I let my people down.
Yeah.
And they won't tolerate that. I'll be a disappointment to them and I won't be able to show my face at home.
And why should the people of Ikaroa-Rāwhiti vote for you?
I think the fact that I was asked to be here because people trust me to deliver. I can stand here and say whatever I want. I'm actually not making any promises other than that I'll listen to people, come back and follow through. So that's why. I'm here because I'm trusted. I've got a track record of delivery. And I live where I'm from because I love it. And I want people to be able to build the communities where they're from, whether they live there or not. I hear people go, oh, kia ora, I'm from Tokomaru Bay, I live in Wainuiomata, but I still love where I'm from. And so I want to build all our individual, well, not me, I want to support people in building their individual rohe so that should they choose to live there, you might have to make some compromises, but it shouldn't be a sacrifice.
Ngā mihi, Cushla, thank you for your time and all the best for the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you.